Hi, Arcfieldweather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Wednesday morning, September the 18th. We'll focus in on the tropical scene in the Atlantic Basin. There continues to be a potential threat for the latter part of next week. The evolving weather pattern will be much more conducive to upward motion over places like the Caribbean Sea, the Gulf of Mexico, as we progress through next week, and that very likely will lead to a tropical storm and the potential of a strong tropical system. Again, the middle or latter part of next week. We're talking a week, maybe 10 days away from right now. This is the current look in the Atlantic Basin. We just passed the climatological peak of the Atlantic Basin tropical season, which is around September 10th or 12th or so. Here we are just a few days after the peak, and quite quiet because of the fact that we are just past a climatological peak. This is a quiet look here, just seeing one system out here. This had been named Gordon as a tropical depression. It has a chance to attain tropical storm status over the next couple of days, but unlikely to impact any land mass here. Just will kind of meander out here over the central Atlantic over the next several days. Nothing showing up right now in the Caribbean Sea or the Gulf of Mexico, but this is the area to watch for later this week, this weekend, and certainly next week. Again, I showed a map yesterday, and we'll go through it again today. Upward motion will increase significantly over this general region and later next week, and you continue to have very warm sea surface temperatures throughout the Gulf of Mexico and Caribbean Sea. You open up that atmosphere in terms of upward motion, and you certainly can end up with a strong tropical system here. And again, we're looking at the middle or latter part of next week right in this particular area. Well, let's go over this particular forecast map here. We showed this in yesterday's video. It shows the upper level divergence, convergence pattern across the globe here. This is from a European ensemble run, and it shows the average pattern for next week, basically September 22nd through the 29th. What I have circled here is what we call divergence. Air is kind of, if you're at this particular location right in here, you have air blowing away in all directions. That's a perfect scenario for what we call divergence. Again, we're looking at the upper part of the atmosphere. This is specifically the 200 millibar level, the average pattern for next week. This is very conducive to upward motion because the atmosphere always tries to compensate, and if there's divergence aloft, there's convergence down at the surface level, and that all leads to, that combination leads to upward motion in the atmosphere. And this time of the year, that spells trouble when you're looking at these very warm sea surface temperatures over the Caribbean Sea or the Gulf of Mexico. So again, this is kind of a pattern change. This week there's a pretty much weak convergence in the upper part of the atmosphere. It changes to strong divergence next week, and again, that could open the door for some tropical storm system to form, perhaps initially in the Caribbean Sea and then moving into the Gulf of Mexico, and it also raises the potential for a major hurricane with this kind of an unfolding weather pattern. Now here's another way to look at what we've just described as divergence aloft, convergence at the surface level. This side of this particular graphic here shows what we're talking about here. We're looking kind of at a side view of the atmosphere, the upper level right in this area right here. This is that 200 millibar level, for example, right here. Divergence, the air is blowing away from a particular location, like right in here. Meanwhile, it's compensated by convergence down at the surface level. This is the surface right here, ground level, or in this particular case, perhaps the ocean surface right here. So you have divergence aloft, convergence at the surface. All of this leads to upward motion. The meteorologist's job is really to look around the world for upward motion areas, because as the air rises, it cools and condenses first into clouds and then into precipitation areas of upward motion, where, in other words, you'll have your rain, snow, thunderstorms. And in this particular case, you look for areas of upward motion over the warm tropical Atlantic. And you're in the heart of the tropical season, as we are. You get upward motion like this over the Caribbean Sea or the Gulf of Mexico, and all bets are off. You may get not only tropical storm formation, but you could potentially get a serious tropical storm reaching category 3, 4, or 5 status. So again, this is the pattern that will be in play next week over the Caribbean Sea and New Mexico. Upward motion in those particular parts of the Atlantic Basin. Well, let's now walk through a couple of model runs from last night. First, we'll look at the Canadian model run, and then we'll look at NOAA's GFS model run, and we'll certainly go through this next 7 to 10 days. And I want to first start off here with a 500 millibar height anomaly forecast map, and take a look here at some of the players that will be important next week into the subsequent weekend here with respect to the potential path of a tropical system should it indeed form. And again, there's nothing right now over the Caribbean Sea or the Gulf of Mexico. All of this is because of the pattern change that has evolved, and pattern recognition tells us that strong upward motion will develop over those two bodies of water, the Gulf of Mexico, Caribbean Sea, especially during next week, and that should lead to the formation of a strong tropical storm. Here we are beginning the day here, and we notice the orange here, a lot of blocking to the north over Canada. Orange represents higher heights than normal, higher pressures than normal. This is can be looked at as a kind of a blocking pattern in the atmosphere, and that's one of the reasons why this rain shield over the Middle Atlantic region has had such trouble pushing to the north over the past couple of days. It's running into this upper level ridge over southern Canada. Now, let's move forward here. There is the weak low pressure area that moved inland from the Carolina coastline a couple of days ago. It will continue to weaken and tend to reform over the western Atlantic and kind of rotate around for a couple of days. Again, because of that blocking pattern to the north, it has nowhere to go, so it will rotate around over the western Atlantic for the next couple of days here. Now we'll move into the end of the week and then into the upcoming weekend here. This is Saturday, and look at this. This is just a tremendous blocking pattern, a tremendous high pressure setting up over northern Canada as we enter the upcoming weekend. Now, we'll move forward here. Again, we're looking at the 500 millibar level into the early part of next week. And now notice here, a lot of blues showing up here. This is an upper level trough sliding into the middle of the country by next Tuesday on this particular model run. And here is the reflection of what appears to be a tropical system that formed over the western Caribbean Sea and now is starting to make a move to the north and west into position to move into the eastern Gulf of Mexico. The interaction between this trough and the tropical system will be quite important in terms of the ultimate path of this potential system. Again, I say potential because it's not actually in existence right now. These are all based on what kind of a pattern we'll have next week with that divergence aloft, convergence at the surface level, right in this part of the tropical Atlantic. We'll move forward here, and it moves over the eastern region of the Gulf of Mexico and starts to interact with this trough. We're a week away from right now, next Wednesday, September 25th. And if this kind of a scenario actually does indeed develop, that could end up resulting in the tropical system riding right up through the eastern states here. We'll move forward here, and indeed that's what happens. That trough kind of pulls up or helps to allow that system to move northward right through the eastern states, and here we are all the way into the end of next week. And again, this is using the 0Z Canadian model run from last night. Now let's look at the surface maps from the 0Z Canadian model run. Here is that low pressure area. Again, it was over the Carolina coastline a couple of days ago, moved northwestward and inland basically weakened or dissipated and will reform over the western Atlantic over the next couple of days. This rain shield has had a heck of a time advancing to the north. It finally produced some shower activity in southeastern PA in the overnight hours, and it was facing that stubborn high pressure area over the northeastern part of the U.S., the southeastern part of Canada that inhibited the movement to the north and east. Now, let's push forward a couple of days. Now that this system is back out over the open waters of the western Atlantic, here we are now into the day on Thursday, tomorrow morning, it could actually strengthen again out over the open warm waters of the western Atlantic. Something we'll have to watch for, because that could end up resulting in some heavy downpours along, especially along coastal sections, let's say from southern New England to Long Island down across the Jersey coastline. Something we'll watch out for now that this low is back out over the open waters. And it just rotates around because it's really cannot move to the north because of that blocking pattern we looked at a moment ago over southeastern Canada, even a double barrel type of system here rotating around as we get into the end of the work week. Now, we'll move forward here into the upcoming weekend, and notice this surface frontal system right here. That is correlated with that upper level trough we talked about that will be sliding into the central states by the early part of next week, and ultimately could play a key role in the path of this tropical system. Here we are now into Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. Again, this is just one model run. Not all models agree with this scenario here. In fact, the Euro model maybe has it farther to the south and west. Several days to go, and we're dealing with a system that's not even on the books yet. It looks like it'll form, though, with the pattern evolving the way I believe it will, with that strong upward motion right in this part of the Atlantic Basin. Here we are a week from right now. Strong system moving into the eastern Gulf of Mexico region. Certainly, Florida has to pay particular attention to this potential system. Middle of next week, later next week. This is, again, next Wednesday, a week from right now, with that trough, kind of allowing it to move up the coastline. Here we go. This takes a movement from eastern Gulf of Mexico all the way up the I-95 corridor by the time we get to the end of next week. Again, several days to go here. We're talking 7 days out, 8 days out, 9 days out, something like that. But this is on the table, and this is certainly something we'll monitor for the next several days. Wanted to wrap up with another model here. Let's take a look at the 6Z run of the GFS. This is NOAA's forecast model. The prior model that we used was the Canadian Met Center model called the GEM. Sometimes it's referred to as GEM model. By the way, all these maps available from tropicaltidbits.com. Here's the system now, the low pressure area over the western Atlantic. Again, it'll tend to rotate around, may strengthen a little bit, and could throw some heavy downpours all the way into southern New England if it indeed intensifies over the next 24 or 48 hours or so. This is as we go into the end of the work week here on Friday, still sitting right there over the western Atlantic because of that block to the north. Now, let's kind of move rapidly through the weekend and into the early part of next week. And again, there's this trough out in the middle of the nation that could end up being a kind of an important player. This, by the way, here, by the time we get to early next week, is that same system that will be spinning around, rotating around the western Atlantic. This is not the tropical system that I expect to see develop over the Caribbean Sea. But let's move forward. We'll see that shortly. Here we go. The middle of next week, here we go, on Wednesday. This is a week from right now. This is the GFS version of that tropical system. The middle of next week goes right into the Gulf of Mexico, and then indeed, this model also has it sliding to the north and east, right up through the eastern states by the end of next week. This is the Friday evening forecast map for the end of next week, September 27th time frame, and certainly something we'll monitor over the next several days, and we'll absolutely be focused on it next week. So the threat is still on the table for a potential serious tropical system here middle of next week, latter part of next week, as the overall weather pattern evolves into one that is much more conducive to tropical storm formation and intensification over the Caribbean Sea and the Gulf of Mexico. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, this has been meteorologist Paul Dorian.